Welcome to In Confidence, hosted by me, Rosie Downing. In this podcast series, I speak to people who've been on surprising, often bumpy rides in their quest for personal and professional confidence, and to the experts who can help you get there. You might not expect to learn vital lessons in confidence from people experiencing drug addiction or even prisoners, but how they overcome their problems, the tools and techniques they use to turn around their lives, can have vital learnings for anyone who wants to be more in charge of their destiny. My guest today is behaviour change expert Shahro Izadi. Shahro has worked in community, clinical and prison settings and is a specialist in how to beat addiction and lose weight. So your first book is called The Kindness Method.
Yes, yeah.
This method is infused in everything that you do when you're helping people change their habits and their behaviours. What is the kindness method and why do you think it's so powerful?
The kindness method is a collection of everything I found to be helpful when I was working in addiction treatment. So when I was working in the NHS for my first placement, I was working with people who were really, really resistant to change. And usually it was in substance misuse, and they had diagnoses with mental health diagnoses also. And so there was essentially a lot working against them when it came to changing their habits. And so the kindness method, I was looking at the addiction industry and the things that were working for a lot of people. And I saw the fundamentals that ran through and consolidated them into a process that anyone could go through. And so it was informed by what works for the most change resistant, on the sharp end of addiction vulnerable. So people who were addicted to really serious, highly addictive drugs. But it came to my attention when I was learning these tools in a clinical and a prison capacity that these are just general everyday behavioral change tools we should have been given at school. What I realized was that the people who were doing really well didn't just have a process, a program, if you will. They were also doing well because they were working with practitioners who were making themselves redundant to those people. And what I noticed was that the three pillars of self-awareness, self-compassion, and self-belief were helping people enormously. So all that to say that I went and found all the most useful things, the self-awareness, the self-compassion, the self-belief. And I also used my personal experience of being very change resistant myself. And I brought it all together and I just looked at literally thousands of people's stories. And I put them together and said, if I just had a sort of creme de la creme of what works in the simplest way possible, in the most generic way possible, then maybe I could make an effort to make behavioral change less of a remedial thing that one does when things have got really awful, and make it more like a fact of life that we should all be able to have a process that we go to every time we're not happy with our habits or every time we want to achieve a goal. It doesn't need to be remedial, it can be optimizing. And so kindness method was the process that I know works because I've seen it with my eyes, but it's based on clinical evidence base.
So you mentioned there your personal story.
When I worked in substance misuse, by that point, I had a gastric band put in and removed. I'd had nearly 2 decades, I guess, worth of up and yo-yo dieting to such extremes, serious issues around food, but very much treating it as a weight problem as opposed to a food problem.
Just say what you mean by that, because I don't know if everyone would understand.
So throughout my life, my weight would fluctuate up to 8 stone at a time because of a problem that I had with binge eating. I thought it was a problem with lack of control, and I was weak-willed and didn't want to be slim enough, and I couldn't keep up a diet, and I wasn't disciplined and things. It transpired that the repetitive dieting, had resulted in me developing a binge eating disorder.
Right. So it was almost like you were dealing with the discomfort of being overweight by eating.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay.
Much like an addict would deal with the discomfort, with the shame of using by using. And so that's where I saw in addiction treatment, I saw myself in it. I was like, what? This is because I had been to every weight loss this and weight loss that, but I had never been to a behavioral change thing. And also the last thing I had for myself was compassion, because of course my belief was that I was being weak and, and then I saw in addiction recovery that compassion was absolutely crucial. To forgive oneself, to understand that it couldn't have gone any other way. This was your story, all of that stuff. And to really understand not just what's bad about my habits, they make me fat in my case, but what's good about the behavior. Why do I, an intelligent person, continue to engage in this behavior regardless of the outcome? And so what I did was I started listening to these people's stories, and I was more inspired and informed than I had been in any other capacity. And I realized I'm addicted to food. I have a serious emotional dependency on food. And if I address that, I would lose the weight that I wanted to lose. And I did by default, and I kept it off forever. I realized that if I treat my weight issue as a
Mm.
food problem
Mm.
and use the same tools I was using in addiction treatment, then the weight loss would be the happy outcome. The same way you in addiction treatment, you turn up to the meeting every day,
Yeah.
and the sobriety is the outcome. So that was my I try to avoid the word journey the longer I work in wellness, but that was my journey.
Yeah.
And what I've done since is to try to tell people, like, we're looking in the wrong place a lot of the time for the tools that some of us need. And I was on the sharper end of things. And so that just completely changed the way that I look at behavioral change.
I can imagine there's lots of people listening to this thinking, I don't have a food challenge. I don't have a drink problem. I don't have a smoking problem, but I have some other kind of problem that I'm too ashamed to admit that I have. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but your tools, I love this. You've got in the kindness method, you've got all sorts of realizations and insights that you come to. And one of them, the fourth realization, is that the same tools that can help people come off highly addictive drugs can help the general population to manage their day-to-day habits. And I feel like there's somebody listening to this who is ashamed of something that they do, and it could be a tiny thing to everyone else, but to them it is massive.
Mm-hmm.
And they're listening to this. What are these? What are these extraordinary, wondrous tools that help kind of like addiction grade habits? How can we use them?
If you find something difficult, take the judgment out of it. The example I often give people is if somebody came to you now and said, Rosie, I have achieved this thing and it took me a year to do. And every day I got up and I worked on it. I've never been able to do it before.
Yeah. What kind of
Did
thing
try
might
my
it be?
entire life. Anything, whether it's I got up and I did a presentation
Yeah.
at, at,
Very
at
common.
work,
Yeah.
or I managed not to look at my phone for a month every morning. If that is something that you find difficult from your baseline, then when you take the judgment out of it, not only can it help you to change that habit and take it seriously and not trivialize it, because if it upsets you that you haven't done it, you haven't. But what it also does, it provides an opportunity to draw power from a source that you would otherwise feel disempowered around. So if you give it the weight that it's due, as opposed to thinking, I should already be able to do this, and you acknowledge yourself for having done it, regardless of what it is, because you find it hard, the power that you can source from your hard thing being addressed is wild.
It's actually acknowledging how hard you find this thing that you're giving yourself shame over because you find it so difficult, but everyone else finds it easy.
Right.
It's actually then going, oh my God, this is so, so difficult. But look, I
Exactly.
can do all of these other things.
Because you started here and now you're here. And your ability to do that
Yeah.
is the impressive thing that you can draw confidence from. Nobody cares where you started. You know, it's
Yeah. So
better.
it's our inability to value our own accomplishments that actually hinders our ability to form positive habits.
It's the decision you have to make on the spot that's going to feel out of character and going to feel counterintuitive until it's a new habit. And for that, you need to feel like, I believe in myself. I'm able to do difficult things. I can
Yeah.
do this. And you need some proof. I think the mistake a lot of us make is thinking that in that moment where I want to quit or the difficult choice is there in front of me, I'm going to draw confidence from how much I want the outcome at the end. That's not where you're going to draw confidence from, especially if you've never had that outcome. You're going to draw confidence from evidence of your capacity.
To get there, which is
Yeah.
so interesting because where I tend to work with people is in creating a vision of success in all areas of their life. We make it super tangible. They almost feel like they're already there. But the things that trip them up are their habits. So I
Yeah.
love this. So we need to create a bank of evidence that we can already get there, that we can do this.
I'm much like yourself. Of course, there is an outcome component, and that
Hmm.
so that people are intentional and focused, so their values and behaviors are aligning, and they know when they've actually hit these checkpoints, because I think that's really important too. And also I think sort of embodying it is very important. But I am a firm believer that when you believe in the plan and the outcome, and that if I follow this, that's the best chance I have to get where I want to be, then I don't think personally that the plan does much heavy lifting. I think then you need to get really zoomed in and focus on how you're going to actually do the next thing. What's the next best step? What's the next thing I said I would do? And what's the next thing I said I would do in the direction of that thing? And for that, I think that you need to be equipped with tools for the pushback. And the pushback will be things that make you sabotage, if you will, or ultimately doubt your capacity, think that something is a fluke,
Mm.
essentially move you away from the practicality and the reality and the common sense of, if I do this in a row, it'll get easier.
Yeah.
You know, if the plan is there, that's fantastic. And if you know it reaches the outcome, great. But having worked with people who are literally like having their children taken away and still can't, I don't believe that long-term aspiration creates um sustained automatic change. I do think it helps you towards a goal, like a deadline based goal completely. But I think longer term, people need to worry about skill building and repetition until almost as a happy bonus, they achieve their goal.
It's
Mm-hmm.
interesting that you've described this really extreme case of, let's say, somebody who has the threat of having their children taken away. And that seems really extreme. I know that there are people who feel just as wretched and they've got outwardly a really successful life, but they just can't stop scrolling on their phone. Or they just can't stop. They can't be present with their family. They can't stop, yeah, being on their emails or whatever it is. What what are the kind of the addiction grade tools that you use?
Literally 20 years ago, there would have been groups of people who were addiction vulnerable, and now everyone is addiction vulnerable. It's safe to assume that you're addiction vulnerable because you're existing amongst ultra processed food, frictionless tech, whatever else it is. Like literally it's designed to hook you. And now everyone's job is to be like, what, to decide and be discerning without any precedent. So I think, yes, first and foremost, if you're engaging in a behavior, whether it's you're scrolling on your phone and you can't seem to stop, etc., move your focus away from what's bad about this habit. You know what's bad about it. Being on your phone is bad. Screen time is bad. Not being with your kids is bad. I come from a thinking that the more you think you're bad and what you're doing is bad, the more you're going to want to engage and bury your head in the sand about it anyway, because of the shame.
Why? Why though?
Because you don't want to sit with that feeling of shame. And so a lot of people, when they already have a distraction tool, they already have a go-to crutch.
Yeah.
So to think that when you make them feel bad about themselves, they're not then going to go to the crutch that they're used to. That's the cycle of addiction that of course, just shame as concept, for someone who already is engaging in a way to distract and numb themselves.
So if that is your thing, definitely mine is my phone. Um, okay, what can I tell myself in the moment? If I am just about to pick up my phone, what's something I can say?
You want to identify the periods in the day when you are doing that most. So
Okay.
this is this is less about sort of like, how can I police myself, and far
Yeah.
more about, what is it teaching me? The times when I'm picking up my phone, what's just happened? Is it because I actually have something on my phone I need to look at? Is it I'm distracting from something? Use it as a deeper exercise to show you the value of that habit to you at that time. Get on board with the fact that we're all going to do things that aren't good for us forever to some degree. So we can be
Yeah.
discerning about what they are, and treat the phone thing as, these are the times when I really don't want to be doing it.
Mm.
And I mean specifically times, Rosie. Like if you said to me now, I don't want to be on my phone 8 till 10, nothing good happens. I'm only spending money and comparing myself to other people. Then I would say to you, well, then 8 till 10 is the time you want to practice. Do a week of no 8 till 10s. Don't worry about policing yourself every single time, because what can end up happening is, if you say to yourself, every time I'm going to use my phone and I shouldn't, or I want to go on
Yeah.
Net-a-Porter or whatever, I'm going to say no, and I'm going to do the thing that Shahro said, and I'm going to lock my phone away.
But so it's actually just starting with very, very small things. A week of 8 to 10s, I could do that.
And you know what? The most potent thing is ultimately doing what you said you were going to do when no one's watching. That's the thing. When no one's watching and you choose to do something hard that no one's patting you on the back for, it will
Yeah.
return. It will return, I assure you. The ROI on those sorts of choices feels like it won't be high, but it really is extraordinary. And
It's,
look at the benefits of your habits. It'll
yes.
be doing something for you. And I think this whole
That's a
idea,
really good question. Yeah, because when you were talking earlier about your own binge eating, one of the questions that I had coming up was, but what's going to replace what that binge eating does for you?
that is a wonderful question that I'm asked a lot. So in the short term, while you're building a habit, getting through cravings, the association, getting that time under your belt, doing what you said you were going to do, remembering, just getting that time under your belt, that streak until it doesn't feel so hard and you realize that life's going to be okay.
Yeah.
That's one stage where, yeah,
Yeah.
distract yourself all you like, you know, create an environment where you can create a streak and remind yourself that you're someone who does what they said they were going to do. Remind yourself of your capacity, get that I'm on a mission feeling.
Actually, it's our relationship with ourselves and how we manage ourselves that is going to help us make the choices in the moment.
What's at the core of the kindness method is the conversation you have with yourself, and that ultimately, if long-term behavioral change or any goal getting comes down to a series of choices made in a row until they're easier. So if you do something that you don't think is great in the pursuit of achieving your goal, or you feel that you've messed up, to imagine how you would speak to a friend in that moment is not just a lesson in compassion. It's a reminder of common sense, because very, very frequently when we have like a minor deviation from our own plans, or we think that we failed, the way we speak to ourselves is not just like unkind,
Yeah.
but wildly counterproductive, and brings about behaviors that only reinforce this idea that we're powerless and not very smart. So like we've messed up in one way, so we'll just mess it up more in lots of ways,
Yeah.
So start thinking about the conversation you would have with a loved one if your task was to keep them on track long term, ultimately to keep them going through the motions until whatever they were trying to do came to be. And one exercise that I find really helpful is to write down the name of a person you love. Thank
Mm.
you.
Anyone
Doesn't
listening,
get
I'm
old.
holding up two of Shahro's books, and I'm also going to be I'll put the third one in the notes at the end.
The process of any change is going to come down to making a bunch of choices in a row. And before I make each of those choices, I need to have a conversation with myself
Yeah.
that talks me into them. And sometimes it's going to have to talk me into them when I don't want it to. Hand yourself over to common sense rather than just saying, what would I tell a loved one to do right now?
Mm.
Imagine I told you to motivate someone you hate and I would pay you £1 million. You definitely wouldn't say, oh, well, you've blown it. That person is going to fail,
Yeah.
you know, even if it feels silly, try to speak to yourself like you're on your own side.
Okay, so I want to end with something really practical. If I was listening to this and I thought, today is the day I'm going to change. Today is the day I'm going to change my life.
Mm-hmm.
What do I start with? What's the easiest, kindest thing that I can start with?
The first thing you do is that you write yourself a letter from 6 months from now, explaining what's happened. You're at your goal, whatever it is you want to change, or wherever you'd like to be in 6 months' time. You write yourself a letter saying, this is what life is like, and write out the process. This is what I had to do. This is what I had to learn. This is the experience that I went through. And what you'll realize is that you are going to factor in and give yourself permission to have a non-linear process. So
Mm.
that will help with the perfectionism along the way.
Yeah,
You will
okay.
A realistic story has skill building in it. It has development. It has bumps in the road. So first of all, you forgive yourself that way. Second of all, you make a list of things you have to learn to be better at. Not just do, but be better at,
Mhm.
in order to stay there when you get there, to remain that person when you get there. So you're not just white knuckling it to a goal, right? So I need to be better at getting up at this time. I need to be better at bouncing back when this happens, whatever it is. And third of all, once you've identified that if you learn these things, you will get to this goal, or at least you'll be happy where you are. If you can't guarantee the goal, you'll be happier than you are now. Then I want you to assume that all the sensible thinking and the planning and the desire and the love of that plan is going to go straight out of the window. The second you're triggered and
Right.
tested,
Yeah.
and you could just trust the version of you that wrote that plan and go through whatever motions that version of you told you to go through until you come back to the place of realizing that it's all mastery. And the second it stops being mastery, it's got personal. But if you can honestly believe when you write that plan, if I do this in a row, if anyone does this with their hands in a row, they'll be here at the end. Then just put 99.9% of your focus on what you need to keep doing that with your hands until it's easier and you're at your goal.
I love this because it actually then becomes scientific. So it's not personal, it's science and you're running an experiment. And every day you put one step in front of the other and you do the things you said you were going to do, you're making the experiment. That's just a evidence of success in your experiment.
Exactly. And then the process takes care of itself, which takes care of you staying there, which takes care of you waking up and resurfacing and realizing you've not only achieved your goals, you also now know exactly how to do anything. And that's why picking your hard thing is very, very important, because knowing what I know now, if my hard thing, let's say I found brain surgery really easy. I'm an exaggerator in case you can't tell. Let's say I found brain surgery really easy, but I found going to the cinema really hard. If I had picked my hard thing, then I would have started on the sharp end, right? So if I can do it with that, I can do it with anything. That's no one else's business. Like right now, I say this all the time. It's writing books is hard for me in many, 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 many ways. It's harder for me to eat half a bag of Maltesers and put down the other half. And when I go on stage, I don't think, Shahro, look, you managed to write a book. I think, look, Shahro, you can eat half a bag of Maltesers and put them down. That you could never do that, dude. That's what I draw from. That's what I draw power from. And it wasn't until I gave myself permission to do that that I realized, actually, if you pick your hardest thing without judgment and you address that, that means you've addressed in private even a harder thing than other people. It's even harder than the things people give you credit for. They're objectively hard.
Yeah.
You know,
Your thing.
It's my thing and my whole life. And I've this has been heavy on me, and I have managed to address it when no one cares and no one knows, and I'm all alone. Ooh, I mean, I just think the confidence you get from that is extraordinary. The compassion for saying, I don't care how hard it is. If I find it hard, I'm going to use it to remind myself of how capable I am. I think that can be very empowering.
That feels like the perfect place to end this conversation because I feel like people are going to listen to this, I hope, and they're going to go out and they're going to say, today is the day that I can do that hard thing that I never believed I could. So thank you so much, Shahro Izadi.
Thank you so much, Rosie. Thank you.
What an enlightening conversation with Shahro Izadi about how to build confidence habits. I was really struck by the idea that being kind to yourself is a viable behavioural change strategy and not a soft option. This podcast is designed to be practical. I want to actively help you boost your confidence. For that reason, each episode is accompanied by a short Substack post with a tool or an exercise to help you apply the ideas we've explored in your own life. You can find those by subscribing to In Confidence on Substack, and these posts are free for season 1 only. And if you have a question for me or a comment on one of the episodes, or you just want to say hi, you can email dearinconfidence@gmail.com, or you can WhatsApp 07377 231 025. That's all from me. See you next time.